Welcome to the Hue Virtual Chat. I'm Tracy Koga, and we're going to celebrate the month of June as Pride Month. And we're going to have some very special guests, and also going to talk about the tragedy that happened in London, Ontario. It's just, well, unspeakable. But anyways, let's open the doors and start our Hue Virtual Chat. Hello, everybody. Hi, Tina. Hi, Uzoma. So good to see you. Hi, Cynthia. Hi, Robin. Hello, Albert. Everybody, you can unmute your mics if you want. Well, I'm trying to be colorful and positive. It is Pride Month, and, I really wanted to talk about all of the good things that are happening around in the world. And I know that, again, we have heavy hearts. All of our thoughts and prayers go out to the family, the Muslim community, the terrible tragedy that happened in London, Ontario. It boggles my mind. Boggles my mind. But anyways, I really want to start first with my dear friend Tina. Tina, and again, I just want to say too, May was Asian Heritage Month, and I saw and watched a few programs, and the common theme, number one, I really appreciated the young people being involved, but the common theme was talking about anti-Asian racism and identity. And I'm second generation, but yeah, I grew up in a different time, I guess. So I wanted to start with you because you do have to leave for another meeting, and we're all in Zoom world. But for people to join in a national forum, which I think is fantastic. So share a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you so much for having Tracy. And I am I'm always sad that I have to leave these meetings early to go to other meetings I have on Tuesdays. But when I see who's here today, I am particularly just so sad that I can't stay for the whole meeting. I look around, I'm like, wow, all these fantastic people on here, some of my favorite people. So I'm really sad that I'll have to leave early. Yeah, but I think, as you said, Asian Heritage Month, I felt was just very different in the nature of conversations this year. Instead of, usually it focuses a lot on celebration and culture and just sharing community. And all the community groups across, the different Asian ethnocultural organizations all felt the need to come together and really foreground anti-Asian racism. And try and engage with it. And I think certainly, yesterday's events in London, Ontario just reinforce the way that, media representations and then actions follow on those, and how this seems to be a repeating pattern. And so I'm really, I'm not sure, excited isn't the right word, but I think I'm really sort of, see this as a positive step. UBC moved forward in, I think it's only been a few months, they've put a huge amount of effort into bringing together a 2-day virtual national forum that's going to be June 10th and 11th. And it is really quite a phenomenal undertaking. And I think it's as people across the country in different positions came together. But really what they're trying to do is to create a foundation for national conversation. And really to think about where we are now with anti-Asian racism, both historically, the past, and what we need to do in the future. So it's bringing together a large number of community organizers, scholars, public intellectuals, some figures from the government, healthcare, media, journalism, the corporate world, and really trying to create tables where we have a common conversation, but also where sectors get to talk and think. And so the events will highlight as well, breaking out into groups, really thinking about what needs to happen. And I think the focus is, what are the key issues? What are the impacts? And what steps do we think we need to take? So really trying to focus on how can we begin to identify together next steps. Obviously, we're not going to solve anything over 2 days, but it is open to everyone. And I will put in the chat where people can look for registration in the program. And just to go with your opening comments, Tracy, they released, and I believe it just came out today, I'm not sure where it'll appear first in the media, but they first launched a survey with Angus Reid as well on the impacts and understanding of anti-Asian racism. And the initial findings out of that first survey, it's the first of 3 that will come out in association with this forum, showed that within the Asian community, the kind of those who are hardest hit by anti-Asian racism are the younger generations. And I think this, I haven't had a chance to fully digest, the survey, but I suspect this is exactly what we would anticipate. Those who are working out in the front lines more often have greater contact, and lower socioeconomic groups. So the patterns are, continue to be troubling in those ways. But, I think there's going to be a lot that will come out of this national forum, and really to see it as a foundation of what to do next. So how do we really create and understand what's happening across the country, rather than in our pockets, where I know Manitobans have been really active in the conversations, but we definitely want to engage across the country. So that's what I have to share. And I'll put it in the chat where people can find that information as well. But I'm always thankful. And now I'll stop chatting, and then I'll get to hear what others have to say today as well.
Well, oh no, and still I want to keep on that conversation, Tina, because we've had so many, even if we look at these few virtual chats, we've had so many great ideas, so many different thoughts, so many chances or desires to make change. I'm going to get Uzoma in the conversation now. We sometimes come to a standpoint, Uzoma. What are the next steps? Here we have a national forum, and I know that there's going to be creative and incredible ideas put across. What are the next steps to have a voice, to make a difference, or make the momentum, or keep the momentum going?
I really appreciate that question. I also really appreciate being able to share space with everyone today. It's great to see familiar faces, people that I know are doing a tremendous amount of really important and good work in all of our communities. And, when I think about how do we move forward, and how do we, see some changes happen that really need to happen, there's a couple of things that come to mind for me. One thing that really comes to mind is that the folks who are most impacted by the issues of the now, and of the yesterday, and of the tomorrow, it's those folks who have to lead the way, right? It's not acceptable. It's not good enough. It's actually not effective at this, and we know this, for people who don't have those lived experiences, who aren't impacted by systemic discrimination, by misogyny, by transphobia, queerphobia. It's not good enough for those folks to be under-resourced, to be consulted as an afterthought, and to not be leading the way in the decisions that are being made to affect change. And so I think one of the big things that we must see are those folks who are in positions of power, those folks who have a ton of resource, those folks who call themselves allies in wanting to move forward in a productive way, in an equitable way. Those folks need to step aside and step back, and they need to support the folks who need to lead. And that's not a comfortable space for a lot of people to be in. That is not a comfortable space to say, you know what, I'm gonna, and I say that too as a healthcare provider, right? As somebody who worked in healthcare a long time, and recognizing that although I may be the provider in the room or the expert on certain things in terms of health, the folks who are accessing care are the ones who should be the experts on what kind of care they need. And sometimes we have to recognize power roles and who has what resource, and we have to step back, and we have to be able to listen and support and amplify and allow those folks who most need that change to lead. And again, it's not easy, it's not comfortable for a lot of people, but we know definitively, that what has been done hasn't been working the way it needs to for those folks who are greatly impacted. And the thing that I keep hearing, and the thing that I keep seeing and living, is that when folks who are most impacted take the lead and are supported and resourced and have the space to do so, change happens.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Case in point, that when you're talking about that, Uzoma, one of the shows we were talking about vaccinations, and we were also talking about the communities that are vulnerable, especially Point Douglas, and we had a guest on, and she said, if you take a look at some of the local communities, how they are at the forefront and getting their own people in their community vaccinated or encouraging them, they are the ones that we should be looking at. And yes, so Tina, let's hope this forum starts a movement. but I know that if they have leaders like yourself, please, we invite you back. And if there's a plan, we will help and we will make it happen because it really needs to end. It really does for everybody. But on that note, we're going to be talking about pride. Hello, Rana. Nice to see you. Hello. Our hearts and prayers go out. We were talking a little bit about that. Maybe, yeah, you know, it's while it's fresh and everything like that, your comments on the tragedy is not the word. I don't know.
No, I think it's kind of beyond a tragedy. You have like a, there's just so many layers to this. You know, it's, and I don't know, and I think a lot of us are just processing what this actually means. But, Alberta has had numerous attacks on young Muslim women, numerous on buses being chased down. Just locally, people, there's always these little conversations about something being said to somebody. Like there's just a lot, and I think that for us as a community, simply because I think that it's a pretty diverse community within itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're quite diverse within ourselves, and I think we have not really brought forward the severity of the Islamophobia in Canada. I think that people keep seeing it like the Quebec the mosque killings. There's been enough at this point where people need to be like, these are real issues, and these issues actually are media and they're created, right? Like they're created. They didn't just appear. And it's been this consistent thing. And I talked to you guys about being in politics, and days before the election, what was going on in my riding, and like there was letters going out calling me a terrorist. She wants to impose Sharia law, like just BS nonsense, passed on to like 20,000 people in a riding. Like this is not something new, and I think at this point, because it is so close to home for a lot of people, it's very, I saw a lot of friends and families just kind of posting, oh well, this is just what families do. You'll see a lot of, and if you live in kind of diverse areas, you'll see a lot of Muslim families with their kids walking down this. It's a very cultural, and I wouldn't say cultural, but it's very normal. Like it's what we do after we eat. Everybody kind of gets out to the road and does their like half an hour walk. So I think that has been very triggering for a lot of people. Where we have always felt safe having our parents walk after their meals in the evening. Like it's very, so there's just a lot of different layers to this, but I don't really have a lot of thoughts, as you can probably tell. I think that my mind is a bit racing right now. I know that there's the prime minister is speaking on it right now, I believe, or he was a little while ago. I don't really feel like listening to a lot of that stuff at this point because it's always the same nonsense. And I've been in that position. I know that you have to say what you have to say, but at the end of the day, like there's probably a lot more that has to happen, and I don't know what that is, and I don't know how everybody comes together, right? Because it's not just this. We just found 215 young children. We just have, there's a lot of anti-Semitic racism going on. There's a lot of anti-Asian race going on. There's a lot of attacks, domestic, like there's just a lot going on, right? Like I think we're all feeling that there's a lot of hatred and negativity, and I think it's perhaps time for us to really reflect on who we want to be as a nation, as a country. Is this what we want? And if this is what we want as a community, I would simply say, stay the hell out of other places, and you're not peacekeepers anymore. You don't get to go anywhere else and claim that you're, civilized and you're all these great things. You don't get to do that. So I think it's a crux. I think we need to start just making decisions about who we want to be as a country. And that takes everybody, like forums like this, where we all come together and make decisions, right? Because it has to happen, because I think these are very pivotal moments, very, very pivotal moments in probably our country's history. not
Yeah.
only our province. So yeah, that's my 10 cents.
Oh,
Is what it is.
we love you. I know it's just hard times. I want to say welcome to our Hugh virtual chat to Albert Mcleod. You know what? Albert was a guest on our Healing Hearts show, and I've asked him to come back again today because he is the president of the Two Spirited People of Manitoba. And Albert, I guess we're going to move on to positive things now. Pride Month. And how has Pride, I guess, progressed and moved forward as opposed to right now where we are? Or has it helped? Have we embraced everyone?
Well, back in 1987 was the first official Winnipeg Pride March. And in those days, it was about 200 people that marched. And we were scared because the legislation that prohibited discrimination had just been sort of approved in our legislative the week before. And many of my colleagues, especially Two-Spirit people who were Indigenous, were uncertain of the violence that we might face that day, just marching from Vimy Ridge Park to Memorial Boulevard. And that's only a few blocks. And we were literally coming out, not only to each other, but publicly and socially and to our communities. So being out, and we knew media would be there, but there was about 20 people who actually wore masks. And we're all familiar with COVID with masks, but this was masks over the top of their head to hide their identity because they might be fired. They might lose their job. They might be rejected by their family. So that was 87. And now, many years later, we have probably the largest Pride event in North America, about 20,000 people. People come from the US, people come from other parts of Canada. It has a Two-Spirit powwow as part of it. And granted, the last year it was postponed, it was virtual. This year it will be virtual as well. So it's been a long process. As well, in terms of legislation, we've had the apology from the Prime Minister to LGBTQ2 Canadians. We've had 76 LGBTQ2 projects funded last year across Canada. One of them is the Two-Spirited People of Manitoba. Mm-hmm. And we've had the recent inclusion of Two-Spirited people in the National Inquiry in the expansion of their mandate around the identity of Indigenous women to include trans women and Two-Spirit people. So in that situation, we do see some movement forward, and that were 32 Two-Spirit specific calls for justice in that inquiry report. And so our work is ongoing. Our project this year is about local capacity building and understanding that people who have been suppressed and oppressed for generations, it takes time to come out of that. And so capacity building, skills building is required because for many people, it's still not safe, right? You could still be rejected. You could still experience violence. You could still lose your job in 2021, right? So we're doing it cautiously, understanding, the climate of Canada and just sort of the violence that we see today. And so that's kind of where we're at. We are celebrating not just June as Pride Month, but because of COVID, it's going to be June, July, and August. And Pride Week is 3 weeks in September, the 3rd to the 12th. So we have a lot of activities planned to really engage people, even though it is social distancing, to let them experience, some form of celebration of their identities. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Albert, you're right. I mean, there has been a lot of movement forward. Maybe if you could just tell us more about Two-Spirited people and how it relates to the Indigenous culture.
Well, I think this refers to some of the early conversation and the idea of colonization. And certainly for the Indigenous people, and we've learned with the Kamloops situation with finding the bodies of 215 buried children who were under the care of the state and the church at the time, And the, describing of genocide in the inquiry, and the Prime Minister said it on June 3rd, that yes, genocide can happen even in the 21st century, even in a first world country. And we do have it historically documented where, quote, very civilized, unquote, states can commit genocide. We've seen it in the last few generations. So Canada's not immune to that. And I think for many Canadians, we are still in denial that it can happen, in the 21st century. And so for, our work is really educating people about that, and that, Canada's not the paradise that it is, set out to be around the world. We are a colonial state. And when you colonize, violence, misogyny, homophobia, and transphobia are part of that process. And you can see it all over the world, right? And so myself, it really is being objective enough to see where we are in the world, who we are, right? And what we need to do as a civil society. What is our conversations about our morals and our ethics when we see the disparity, when we see the ongoing misogyny in our country? So we have to dismantle that. We have to dismantle the colonial aspects that are harmful to us as Canadians. And I think the Two-Spirit people have, the church and state attempted to erase us for over 100 years, totally suppressed. So when we had the name Two-Spirit, it was reclaiming that, right? It was reclaiming our spiritual connection to the natural world, to our spiritual world, the spirituality of our families, and also the spirituality of our nations. And all of that predated colonization. So in many ways, we are reclaiming that we not only belong to the larger LGBTQ community, we belong to our own communities and our own families. So that spirituality is about that resurgence and that reclamation.
Oh. Thanks so much, Albert. We'll come back to you. Uzoma, now, Pride Month. It's a big question, but what does that mean for you?
That is a big question. That what does Pride Month mean to me? I feel like it changes every year. It grows a little bit. It evolves a little bit. And I only the first time I actually went to Pride wasn't very long ago. I can't remember the year, but it wasn't like I started going to Pride when I was 18 or 19. It was actually pretty recent for me. And that was because I never really saw Pride as a place that I would fit in. Everything that I saw of Pride was like white, shirtless, gay men, white queer women. There wasn't a lot of Black representation, African representation. And so when I first went to Pride, for me, it was really kind of like what a lot of, I think, folks experience, just kind of scoping it out. Let's, get our feet on the ground here and see if there's spaces for me. And certainly it's evolved well beyond that now, where Pride really is, it's becoming more so right here in Manitoba, a place and space that people can make it be what it needs to be for them. And I think that's really important, that whatever your context is for your own identities in your own life and your community, it's important that Pride be a space where you can express who you are and you can take up space safely and be welcomed and be connected and feel like you have community. And so for me, Pride is really about pushing back against the systems that would try to deny us those opportunities, to try and deny us that space. And it is about embracing the relationships and the space and the narratives that make us who we are and amplifying that, right? And it's not just about partying and celebrating and joy. It's about deconstructing, learning, unlearning, demanding, protesting. It's about all of those things, and it's very complex. But at the end of the day, it's beautiful, and I'm really proud to walk in a community alongside so many people who do so much work to make Pride what it needs to be for each and every person in our communities.
Yes, and no doubt, again, it'll be a little different being it all virtual. Before, Tina, before you have to leave, maybe your comments on the Asian identity too, because being Asian too, I know that there are things that just aren't talked about, mental health and probably gender and sexuality. So, yes, has there been a forward movement?
Well, I think again, these are ones that are often generational. It's a struggle. And I think, there's so much that I think in the Asian community that we are trying to open spaces for discussion on precisely these. And certainly new community groups emerging that are much more concerned with issues of intersectionality, questions of gender identity, sexuality, also the different Asian identities, and the ways that oppression happens within Asian communities. So certainly the way that, hierarchies come into play, family expectations. And I think, I'm really happy to see those conversations. And I think many of us, our intent is when we get to this national forum to ensure that those are at the forefront. We are really happy to see we're trying to also do student-based ones. So there is a whole separate, students are integrated into the national forum, but also have their own space for a student dialogue. And I think as, much of this goes that, the younger people will tell us what they need. And exactly as Uzoma said at the forefront, we need to listen to those voices. We need to hear how the communities haven't created the spaces. Because I think, as we've all been saying, being oppressed in one sphere doesn't necessarily mean that you are not, also duplicating or creating systems or even just relationships that don't enable people to express their full identity. So my hope is that all of this will be on the table as we work through them, because, as this group says over and over again, whether it's all forms of oppression, if we're not going to understand them as an intersectional experience, we've all missed the boat, and, we might as well, kind of stop there and just regroup. So, that's my hope, that these conversations keep getting there, and that everyone's holding each other accountable. So yeah, and thank you so much. And I'm so sorry, Cynthia, Robin, Linda, I don't even get to hear you speak today, which will make me very sad, but I know you'll all have a great conversation.
You can watch it on our website, Tina.
I will. Thank you,
thank you
everyone.
so
Enjoy
much.
the rest of your day.
Bye-bye. So on that note, where'd she go? Cynthia. Yes. Okay, well, you can fill us in on your observations of what it is like in England, but, we want to know, too, your personal experience, too, when you were here in Winnipeg, and how do you compare the both, or do they compare?
That's really intriguing, because I have intentionally not engaged as much with the community here. I'm just living my life and building my business and trying, to do that, which was something that I felt I couldn't shake in Winnipeg, that there was always this history. I mean, I did live there for 45 years, so it's obvious I would have history. But yeah, it's really intriguing that, when I hear Uzoma and Rant and Rana and Albert talk, all the things that we've talked about before, the youth are not the leaders of tomorrow. They're leaders today. We need to step out of the way, let them lead. That, communities that are being oppressed, you need to let them lead, step out of the way, right? And again, we've talked about Canada's shame, right? That idea of travel internationally is like, oh, Canada, like, why would you want to be here? And it's like, well, Canada's not the sparkling gem that you think it is. It's great, but it's not perfect. And so looking at it in a real light, and it was very telling in the story that Albert shared that, a lot of the things that he referred to, happening back in the 80s and so forth, they do still happen today. I mean, one that I try and follow and so forth is the engagement with, for instance, why are legislators not banning conversion therapy, which many of the LGBT plus community have been exposed to, and Canada has its own awful history in Toronto, with that. So it's like all of these things kind of come together. So when I look at my own story and I kind of look, well, I lost my birth family, I lost my marriage of 32 years, and I ended up leaving my career in Winnipeg and needing to create space in order to really find myself and to land at a place where I'm just me and just being able to live. So I would say that it's not that Canada is worse than the UK or the UK. I mean, in fact, for trans people, the UK is one of the worst track records. And in fact, that's one of the reasons I came here, is because when I do engage, I mean, this is the home of, some very well-known authors who shall not be named, because they don't need more press. And, that's the kind of people that I'm prepared to go up against when we talk about recognizing, as Uzoma said, the equity of our rights, right? I mean, this is not a pie, right? This is not, I get my equitable share of it and you get none. No, like, we all get equitable share of our rights. And that doesn't go away, no matter where you're at. And no matter which country I've been in, I see the fight, and it's represented in different ways. South America was represented in one way, Canada, United States, a different way. When I was in Israel last year, it was a different way. And now in the UK, again, we're still kind of coming out of this. And so Pride here is not until September. So you don't see a lot right now. And I'm really interested to see, because in their support for their healthcare system, the NHS, they use the rainbow. And not at the rainbow flag, but a literal rainbow. And it's like, okay, how are they going to deal with that communication of the branding of this support for the healthcare? Can it be somehow turned into support for all the diverse people? And again, remember, in my world, I consider women to also be oppressed communities within misogynistic, patriarchal systems. So I'm sure that's not the upbeat story you were looking for, but
no.
that is the harsh reality of living as a woman with a transgender history who's queer and pansexual. That is the world that I live every day. It doesn't go away. And you just, as I'd like to say, you learn to live like a clock. You find a way to move forward.
Mm-hmm. Well, you certainly have. Wow. Robin, you commented you were surprised that Pride is so new to Winnipeg. So maybe an Australian view.
Well, I had no idea. So, God, I haven't really got into the community since I moved here. Truth be told, I got here and went to work on the business and forgot about life. And then COVID hit and it was like, And because last year I was like, oh, I'm going to start connecting with people. And yeah, that didn't happen the way it was. But I mean, for me, I mean, Australia has its issues. I want to be very clear. But I've been going to Mardi Gras in Australia since, I don't know, like Mardi Gras, if I think about 1987, and Mardi Gras is it was at the time the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender kind of thing. It was one of the biggest, if not the biggest in the world. And I remember my first one was maybe 85, and there were 600,000 people there, and there were I don't know, 150 floats, and there was political stuff, and there was the celebration and the marching boys and marching girls, which truth be told, I'm awful. There's some nice eye candy. I'm not going to say there's not. And it was this, I remember when I moved to Sydney, and it was like, oh, I can be out and proud. And there was in entire areas of the city that was like quite a significant area in the city that was like, we're all just hanging out, we're all having a good time. There were like massive parties to raise money. Like I went, it was then, I don't know what it's called now, it was called the Rat Party. It was in September, and it was to raise money for Mardi Gras, and they would have, 50,000 people at this party just to celebrate and raise money for the Mardi Gras parade. And it's an entire month of concerts and comedy and like events. And so I guess when I came here and I went to my first Pride 2019, I was like, oh, like I really was. I was awful. And this is no offense, but I was like, oh, it's not that big. And then I hear like you talk about like it's only been around that long, so of course it's not that, it's big in terms of here. But I remember talking to Charlotte and going, oh wow, I wonder how we can, even increase this more. And I'm sorry there was for being such a judgy asshole. I had a great time with it, but it felt such a little event compared to what I'd been used to. And, I've done stuff in New Zealand too. And, the queer community there is like very positive and very forward. And, we're still getting bashed and killed in both of those countries, right? But the one thing I think is super cool for me, it was only, I don't know, 4 years ago that I was like, oh, this is why I haven't fitted into the lesbian community, because, there's a guy in here and it doesn't quite fit. And I actually tried to date someone here a couple of years ago, and they went, I don't want to date you. I want to date a girl, not a guy in a girl's body. I was like, oh. And then I thought, actually, I'm really good being me. I'm a hybrid. That's how I describe myself. And I'm just going to get involved as me. And I think that's the piece I'm hearing right now, that we can be ourselves. And I want to do whatever I can to create that environment for everyone, whether it's about, like this or whatever it's about. Like my life is about saying to people, you can be you and you can be true to you, and it's okay. And I will stand with you as we go through this world, right? And there'll be times when we get knocked down, and it's the strength in getting back up again that I think is super important. So I just gibbered. You know me, Tracy, I just gibber. But I feel honoured to be part of this conversation because it hits home, and it hits home strongly. And I think when I came to Canada and heard about Two Spirited, I was like, oh, that really fits. That feels so like grounding. Oh, I just got goosebumps. So the ancestors are saying, yep, you got it right. So thank you.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you. You know what? And it's all just about sharing stories, I think, right? And learning from each other. And this is such a great conversation to know that it's just more. We love the parade. Parades bring people together. But we do know that it goes much more beyond a parade. And it is creating a safe space. And it is allowing Cynthia to have her own personality, to run her business as free as any other human being should be allowed. And that leaves me with Linda Have you attended a pride parade?
Oh, many pride
Yeah.
parades. It's funny, Rob, listening to you because, coming from here, the last 2 or 3 that I went to, I'm like, it's so big. There's so many people because I remember, years ago going and I appreciate Albert, you setting that scene of 1987 and how small and I wasn't at the first, but I would have been ones in the 90s and they were tiny, so it's grown exponentially here, so that's my experience. And yeah, I went I've been to a lot. I was talking about this with Tracy the other day. I was extremely fortunate to have my mother, who was very, very open-minded, progressive thinker, kind of ahead of her time. And she was always LGBTQ positive. And in fact, she married the first gay couple in Winnipeg. She was a Unitarian chaplain. And so she was always a real leader for all of us. And so I did go to many pride parades, and I also I started to bring my kids because I wanted them to also see the celebration, the politics of it, the what it means to attend and to be a part of that. So I've appreciated this conversation so much because I've heard everyone saying similar things about sharing stories and letting the people who have experienced oppression and traumas lead the way. And where I come from, my business as a coach, and I'm a writer, and I'm also a trainer. Oh, hi, Susie. I'm always interested in how that happens, the actual mechanics of people who have stories to tell and yet who have experienced oppression often have the hardest time getting their own stories out. They're often, rightly so, scared and don't have the confidence or the support or the resources to get those stories out and to move beyond their own fears. That's something that is personally interesting to me. How do we help people tell their stories? And that's something that I do in my work. I'm very passionate about helping people speak up, speak even when they're in fear, even when, I can't remember who said it, but speak even when your voice quakes, even when you're feeling that sick pit in your stomach. How do you still come forward with your ideas and present them? And so I find this conversation so interesting and so important to have. I would just like to see more of the youth empowered to use their voices. And so that's something, right, Rob, bias for us. So yes, thank you for including me in this conversation. It's very important.
Oh, wow. So I want to, still following up on personal experience, lived experience. Albert, Uzoma, Robin, Cynthia. One question, and I think I'll probably hopefully get different answers. What was the biggest hurdle that you faced, and how did you resolve it or overcome it?
We had a recent situation in Winnipeg where we couldn't pay for our security for the route on our main thoroughfare in Winnipeg. So we were relegated to the city by a side street. So I wrote a letter to our mayor and I said, we are citizens of this city. We pay taxes. We have the right to march in the public thoroughfare like any other citizen does every year. Santa Claus gets to go down our main thoroughfare every year, so why not us? And I said to the mayor, I said, we began this in 1987. And I said, you have a choice. You either, make it happen next year that we go on our main thoroughfare, or we will go and do it ourselves like we did in 1987. So now we are back on our main thoroughfare. And yes, it was a few years ago, but we have to be vigilant because, as Uzoma said, we have to call out those bureaucrats, those policymakers, because it creeps back in very subtly. Just with the violence we see in Canada, those conversations begin at the kitchen table with the parents standing, talking, listening, educating their children about their morals and their ethics and their phobias. And we see the result today in the violence, against people of color, the violence against queer people, because it begins at that kitchen table. And that's where we have to reach, right, to educate people. We live in a society with a constitution. My uncle went to fight in World War II, and he fought for freedom against fascism. And that's the freedom I live today, is in his memory. And that's why I walk on the street. I take my space in this nation on the streets to show people you could see me and I could see you. Thanks.
Thank you, Albert. Uzoma?
So when I think about, biggest challenge or challenging moments, I really do reflect on my own personal journey. Mm-hmm. And, what were pivotal moments for me. And, that's a long story, and it's still being written, right? It's still a work in progress. But I certainly think about how much lighter the work that I wanted to do became when I let go of what wasn't mine. And that's really hard. It's really hard to let go of what doesn't belong to us, to step out of the boxes that people build and put us in and tell us we're supposed to somehow fit inside of. It's a challenge. But when I did that, and when I committed to only surrounding myself with people who respected that, people who embraced that, doing the work became so much lighter. It just, because there wasn't this nagging, persistent thought in the back of my mind and on my heart that was putting doubt in me, that was making me question who I was. It was just a burden that was lightened tremendously. And so, working alongside and supporting people who are doing a lot of the heavy lifting, I think about the importance of lightening that load for them. How can I contribute in a way that allows for people to do what they need to do, whatever that is for themselves, without carrying what doesn't belong to them? And so it's about identifying when messed up things are happening and naming it and calling it out for what it is and saying that you don't accept that, I don't accept that. It's about finding ways to not only navigate the world in a way that makes sense for me, but supporting people in navigating the world in the ways that make sense for them. And so, and that takes a commitment, a daily recommitment, and learning and unlearning. I talk about learning and unlearning a lot because it's true in terms of how we move forward and the things we have to let go of, right? But that's an ongoing challenge, and those are ongoing moments. There are moments when I'm like, I don't want to do this today, or, there are moments where there's that little feeling in your stomach where it's like, this is going to be really uncomfortable, and then you just push through. Especially if it's, for other folks, you push through because you want to lighten that for them. And ultimately, I wouldn't be here today if people didn't do that work before me. And so I feel a tremendous amount of responsibility to make sure that people in the future, people down the road, people right now have it easier than I've had it, because ultimately we're all connected. So.
Well, thank you so much, Uzoma. Cynthia.
Yeah, you would think in 2016, when I officially came out, that, the 50 years before that the movement had begun and, been working, that allowed me to get to that point to deal with it. But yet I still, in my own mind, had to deal with the rationalization, the story that was based upon the heteronormative expectations that I knew of the way the world worked, that I would have to be prepared to lose my birth family, to lose my marriage, to lose my kids, to lose my job, to lose my professional reputation, to lose all my friends, to lose my finances, and so on. And that some people go, oh, well, you were so brave. But as I put in the chat, being brave is simply not an absence of fear, but learning to move forward in spite of it. And for me, getting out of my own way and allowing my journey to move in spite of all of that was really the challenge that I faced.
And then you blossomed into somebody very, very special. And I always say it too. Sorry, acceptance without understanding.
Understanding.
Yes, that's.
I was blessed with that message. So.
Yes. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Robin.
Well, damn it, if they hadn't taken my shit. So, like self-stigma, that internalized stuff about, oh, I should try and fit in. And I remember that I actually went to the US and worked in a ski season because I also had people telling me stuff, and I was like, so, like, all my straight friends were like, you're straight. All my gay friends were like, you're not. And I was just like, my head's gonna come off. And I went and worked a ski season in the US and just went, this is who I am. And I had never done anything. And I went back to Australia and I told my parents, and my mum didn't talk to me for ages. My dad was super intelligent in the middle of a Chinese restaurant and said, all you need is a good poke and you'll be right. And I was just like, oh. And so dealing with self-stigma, like the internal stuff, but also my family at the start were a challenge, and they still are at times, right? Because, when I finally let go of, I have to fit into the lesbian box, when I let go of that and like got to where do whatever I wanted and express, this was like just life changing. And some of my family still struggle with that, like come home as long as you don't look like that, or bring that weird stuff. And so I think that the challenges are there, and I think I take from Cynthia, like brave. I think I'm brave every day because I'll say stuff to my family, but I also made a commitment that I would never hide any of who I am. So, I often wear coloured ties because I love them and they're an expression of me. And whenever I go to train a group, or I don't care who it is, I share who I am up front. And I think what I want to do is model, goosebumps. Woo! What I want to do is model how I hope the world will be, so everyone can just be themselves in every moment. So even when there's challenges with, running training, you never know what people's views are going to be. And I just put it out there. Here's the reason why I wear this tie or this suit, and like, you can have your own opinions, but this is me and I'm me. And what I've seen is people say thank you, because when they see people just stand and be themselves, it allows them to step into a different space. So the challenges are ongoing, right? You know, they haven't gone away. They just sit there, and sometimes they pop out and I'm like, yeah, I heard you, now why don't you just sod off? Because I'm going to be me every moment of the day. And that puts me in places that I could get hurt, and I'm going to do it anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. And that is why you are Robin Priest, Live Your Truth, peer, mentor, supporter, everything, great listener. You put everything into perspective. Thank you, all of you, for sharing your stories. So now I'm going to go because Susie's joined us. Hi, Susie. And, well, somebody else has joined us with Rana. Hello there. Hi. Oh, so cute. Oh, and Linda. So the three of you ladies here, you've heard those compelling stories. How important, or how do we put in perspective identity? How important is identity? Linda, you have teens, you know, getting into that adult years. Susie, you've got kids ranging from little to getting into the teen years. Rana, you look at your beautiful, beautiful niece there. How important is identity? And it could be anything: cultural, gender, sexual identity. Susie.
To me, it's not the identity that is important in what I instill in my children, but it's the ability to accept and love people for who they are and who they tell you they are, no matter what. So just because you're not experiencing something, just because you feel that your gender matches your identity, you have to understand that not everybody has that same experience, and that you must advocate and be compassionate and be accepting and celebrating of people who are living their truth. I think that with everything that's happening right now, I feel like everything is so heavy right now. You know, the news out of London, everything that I see, even with Pride Month, you know, I'm so tired of hearing people say that, you know, someone is embarrassing them, or, you know, they don't know how to deal with somebody's, you know, lived experience or truth or whatever. Like, I have zero understanding for that, in the sense that people who live in privilege, who understand, you know, that their heteronormative life makes sense to them, have no idea what struggles other people who are trying to live their truth are going through. So to come out with, you know, like this, I'm thinking back to a video that I was watching on Facebook of an Australian couple watching their son get married during this Pride Month. And they were so, you know, like, oh, I hope it's not going to be a spectacle and this and that. And it's just like, would you be saying that to your daughter if she were getting married today? Would you be saying that to your son if you were marrying a woman today? Like, the lack of understanding and acceptance and celebration of the people that we love blows my mind. Because that's not love then. That means that you have conditions upon that relationship. You have outdated ideas of what that needs to look like. And that's on you to fix. That is not on your children. That is not on anybody who is already struggling or dealing with living their truth in this supposedly black and white world that we live in, that is a lot more gray and rainbow colored in between. That is not their job to fix you or to explain to you why it's okay. That's your job to battle years of conditioning and years of being told what's normal, what's acceptable. You know, like, I don't think that's appropriate. And especially as a parent, I can't imagine speaking that way to my child and saying, because you're having a gay marriage ceremony, and I hope one day we can just call it a marriage ceremony, I don't know whether to be happy for you or not. Like, it does not compute for me. And so I think that we really need to challenge ourselves and our way of thinking and say, why do we believe the things that we believe? Who told us to believe them? Who does it benefit when we believe these systems are in place? And if it's not benefiting the child that I'm raising, the child that I love, I really need to examine my adherence to these belief systems, because maybe I've been wrong. We cannot raise another generation of children who feel unloved, who feel unaccepted, who feel they have to hide who they are from the people who brought them into this world. I have zero patience for that. Zero. What I want to do is raise children who understand that they are loved and celebrated just for being who they are every single day. I tell my children every day, even they're not perfect every day, but I say to them, even in those moments, I love you all day, every day. And that's true forever. And if you as a parent cannot say that to your child, you need to examine what's wrong in you, because that's not about your child anymore. That's about what you lack in emotional growth, in maturity, and the understanding and capability to be compassionate as a person. Happy Pride, y'all. That's what I have to say to that.
Oh, Ronnie, you get to follow that.
Fair.
There you go.
Yeah, that's always a tough follow, and 100% agree. I mean, Susie's always on point when it, and there's no disputing that. It's completely true. I think the question was to do with identity.
Yes.
Right? Like
Yes.
basically,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just gonna take a different approach to it. And I love you, Susie, and definitely happy Pride. And I'm missing the parade this year. Like I'm looking at old pictures from the past. I'm like, oh, it's sad, not because we all recognize that we can't be together like that. But it's just like when you go back and you look at all these pictures, you're like, wow, it was such a moment to join people that you maybe wouldn't have seen all year. Like I remember just joining even as leader of the parade, and we used to go and you just see like a billion people that you hadn't seen all a year. So it was always like this amazing reunion. So I don't know, I hope we get to make it up somehow throughout the year. But but just going back to identity, I think that it's an interesting question for many reasons. I think that those of us, or those people, and not us specifically, not me specifically, but there are people who have, and I wouldn't really call it identity, but they have lost pieces of who they are through colonization, and whether it's in Canada or anywhere else in the world where, if you do, and I'm not going to get into political stuff, but basically any other colonized place in this universe. Where people have been made and been stripped of their languages, their cultures, their religions, or whatever else, it becomes very clear that those are very crucial, critical, important parts of your being. And you can only know that once you've lost it, or you've seen or knowledge, or you've seen or you've studied or you've watched or you've had first-hand experience of people who have lost it. So I think that there's all sorts of identity. Yes, there's sexual, gender identity, there's all sorts of stuff. I know we're talking about Pride right now. There's a lot of really important identities surrounding that, but I think that it's a bigger process, and it's a bigger issue, and I think that it's important. Like I would never ever be a person who would argue that those things are not critically important. And you could just look to the world where it was stripped of people, and you can go right here in Canada. How devastating is it to lose your language, to lose your culture, to lose your existence and not be who you are in any capacity, whether it's gender, sexuality, religion, language, anything, whatever it is that you identify with, losing any part of it, or being forced out of it, or being forced to have it stripped from you. It's traumatic, so yeah. So I mean, bigger conversations for a bigger time, but I just throughout history, I think we should look at what has happened when these things have been stripped from people, and how has that affect generations to come, and sadly, I think that we never want to look back at history it just seems that history continues to repeat itself in different forms and ways. And I think that if we would just look throughout history, we'd learn a lot of lessons about all of these issues, right? And the big what not to do. You know what I mean? Big what not to do, right? And if you just look at the Indigenous community today, like man, like to be so strong in your language, to have to still be speaking it, right? Like imagine the strength and how powerful it is within them to be able to still revigorate it and lift it. And it was never been gone, you know what I mean, despite all the challenges and despite all the fight to eliminate it. It's still it's still thriving, and it still exists, and it's still beautiful. But that is because of individuals they took it upon themselves to fight. Nobody helped them with that. It was their own doing. So I keep teetering because I want to, and I just don't want to get super political, but I mean, there's other places in the world who are dealing with this right now as well. So, simple Google search will tell you all the nations across the world that are being forced to be something that they're not. And I think essentially what we're talking about is what happens when you're forced to be something that you're not. So yeah, that's my 2 cents. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Rana. Linda, I don't know if
I'm seeing the time, and it's almost through. So I just
no worries.
My takeaway is I wish for everyone to have a space like this, welcoming, safe, open, listening, heard, accepted, seen. That is my wish. And I like how Albert said about, the conversation starts at the kitchen table. And I like to, right now I'm seeing this as our kitchen table, and we have I'm just grateful to be a part of this conversation, because I think it, for me, gives me strength to go out and help others to speak up and help promote other people's stories, and really, but I get to come from a place of having been heard and having been seen and having that feeling of safety. So that's something that I'm truly thankful for, and wish for everyone else. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Linda. Albert, before we leave, you have been such a trailblazer and a leader, and I'm just curious, when we celebrate Pride in Winnipeg for those glorious beginnings of September this year, what do you hope for? What would be your biggest hope and wish in all of these years that you've been such an activist?
Well, what I do is I work with the Ojibwe language specialists, and as Rana mentioned, the importance of mother languages. And there is a belief in the Ojibwe language about the creation of humans, and it predates colonization. And what the belief is that every child born has a role, a purpose, a destiny, and a divine gift. That is what the Indigenous people believe about creation of humans, that we all have that potential, regardless of our gender identity or sexuality. Indigenous people understood this tens of thousands of years ago, and that is something we want to share with the world. Our understanding of the relationship of the human to the natural world, the spiritual world, and there was no discrimination. And so we can build on that, right? That we all carry a divine gift. We are intentional, right? No matter what anybody says, we are intentional parts of creation. Thank you.
Thank you, Albert, so much. So I want to thank all of you for joining in this conversation. Thank you so much, Uzoma. I know that you're very busy. And oh, again, so I'm always having this one last thing. How are things going in your constituency, in the city? I'm very sorry, I hate to bring that word up, pandemic and vaccines and all that other stuff, but how is it going?
You know, everyone's navigating this pandemic the best ways that they can, and I'm continually inspired and impressed by the ways Manitobans have risen to this situation and show up for one another. And it's, as a politician now and in this role, I certainly have been very unimpressed by some of the decision making that I think has left some folks without the resource and support they deserve. But my job is to highlight, inequities and to push for us to close those gaps. That's my job, and that's what I'm proud and committed to doing. And I have to say, I represent Union Station, which is in downtown Winnipeg, which looks markedly different now than it did pre-pandemic for a number of reasons. But there's just there's a hopefulness with people that is amazing. There's I think a light now that people are looking at and can see and can feel because of that vaccine distribution. And I will give a little shout out to Knox United Church, which is at 400 Edmonton, right across Central Park. There is a vaccine clinic happening there on Thursday for folks ages 12 years old and up. Very limited doses, but that clinic is going to be happening. I'm going to be working at that clinic, volunteering, and we want to make sure that people who live in the Central Park area, the downtown community, can get vaccinated in their own community, leave their apartments, go across the street and get the vaccines that they need to access. So I think that we're all kind of feeling a little bit fatigued for sure, but I know the more and more I talk with people, they're feeling hopeful because we do have vaccines and they are being distributed. And we just have to do a better job of getting them out to folks and making sure that people have what they need to stay safe and stay connected in the midst of all of this.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And yes, great news. Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining in this conversation. I really appreciate it. Next week, Susie, maybe you could help me with this. I would like to have some restaurant owners come on, maybe even one do a little cooking demonstration to get us out of all of this, because I don't know. Maybe we can go onto patios. I don't know yet. But so
Yeah,
maybe,
we'll find that out very soon. So yeah,
Yes.
I can hook you up, Tracy.
okay. Love ya.
Tracy, can we give a shout out to all the nurses? I
Yes.
believe that they're going through negotiations or
the
something's
nurses.
happening and they're going to be striking. And can we also just clarify, because it's taking a lot of energy out of me not to literally respond to every ridiculous comment there is out there about how nurses are leaving the community high and dry. Listen, it's a rotation. The services are not affected by them standing up for their rights. Let's just make that clear. Okay? Services are not affected. They are still doing the best they've been doing all throughout this pandemic. So let's just clarify that and shout out to them. And I hope that they get everything that they deserve, and the community should be standing side by side with them, because where would we be without them? Seriously.
Oh,
So
most definitely. Okay. Thank you, Rana. All right, everybody, go and enjoy your beautiful Tuesday. Good night, Cynthia. Thank you so much. We'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.